Good morning, everyone. I'd like to thank the conference organizers for giving me the opportunity to present to you on the rollout of new HIV prevention technologies. It's been almost a decade since the first, it's been more than a decade since the first evidence of efficacy of daily oral pre-exposure prophylaxis was published. PrEP is now a valuable additional HIV prevention tool, and global uptake has continued despite the COVID-19 pandemic. By Q2 of 2022, 2.2 million people have initiated oral PrEP worldwide. Much of the PrEP scale-up is still concentrated in a fairly small number of countries, most notably the United States, and in Eastern and Southern Africa, in Kenya and South Africa. Despite this substantial progress, there are still enormous gaps in PrEP availability, with only 28% of the target 3 million in low and middle income countries using PrEP by 2020. This is only 8% of the new global target for 2025. Among those people who do initiate oral PrEP, the persistence is a key challenge. Although the PrEP paradigm relies on prevention-effective use, the early drop-off of use in demonstration projects and PrEP programs is striking and bears closer examination. Studies have suggested that reasons for premature oral PrEP discontinuation include a range of drug, health systems, and social context issues, and the COVID-19 pandemic has led to huge disruptions in healthcare services and PrEP delivery. Many users talk about the need for a range of PrEP options that can be fitted into their lifestyle and life stage. And in particular, there's huge interest in long-acting options that are less user-dependent and may overcome some of the barriers to persistence. Today, I'm going to talk to you about two new PrEP options that are likely to become part of our PrEP programs in our region in the next 1 to 2 years. The first of these is the dapivirine vaginal ring. The dapivirine ring is made of a flexible silicon matrix polymer and contains dapivirine and NNRTI. Women insert the ring themselves into the vagina and replace it every month. The ring delivers dapivirine directly to the site of potential infection and has low systemic absorption. Studies have shown the ring to be highly acceptable to users and their partners. 2 phase 3 trials showed that the ring was well tolerated and reduced HIV risk in women by 30%. Open label studies that followed these trials showed greater use with an estimated 50% reduction in HIV risk. On the basis of these data, in July of 2020, the EMA issued a favorable opinion on the ring, and this allowed WHO to pre-qualify the ring. In March of 2021, WHO included new clinical recommendations for the ring, with a recommendation to offer the ring at sites where oral PrEP was available. Currently, there are a range of regulatory submissions in progress in the region, and we heard of approvals in Zimbabwe last year and in South Africa earlier this year. When considering implementation of the ring, there are a number of research gaps which may be important for programs. The first of these is data on safety in pregnancy and breastfeeding. While no reproductive toxicity concerns were identified in preclinical studies, and no adverse events on pregnancy or infants were identified during the trials, the number of pregnancies in those trials was small. 2 additional safety studies in pregnant and breastfeeding women are ongoing. The first of these is DELIVER, which is assessing the safety and acceptability of the dapivirine ring in pregnant women in Malawi, South Africa, Uganda, and Zimbabwe. Reassuringly, no safety concerns were identified in cohort 1, and the study will move to cohort 2. With the Be Protected study in breastfeeding women, enrollment of 197 women was completed last year, and results are expected in mid-2020. These data on pregnant and breastfeeding women are important for program implementation and will lead to the removal of restrictions for use in these populations who we know are at risk for HIV. Data gap really relates to the acceptability, safety, and efficacy in adolescents. At the time of its recommendation, the EMA requested additional data in younger women aged 18 to 25. This is because of the low adherence in the 21 and under age group observed in the trials that led to the absence of efficacy in this group. The results from the REACH study presented at CROI this year and at IAS last year provide promising evidence that with adequate counseling and support, young women may derive benefit from the ring. The REACH study showed that the REACH study enrolled just under 250 young women aged 16 to 21 in Uganda, South Africa, and Zimbabwe. Using a crossover design, women received the ring or oral PrEP, and this was followed by a choice period. No safety concerns were observed for either product. Both products were highly acceptable, and importantly, during the choice period, 2/3 chose the ring. Interestingly, adherence was higher for both products than observed in previous studies. These results provide important insights into the adherence support package that might be required for younger populations when offering them new HIV prevention products. A global action plan has been developed to identify key areas of action to support ring introduction at a country level. In addition to the work to secure regulatory approvals and to develop national implementation guidelines, there are additional steps to forecast demand and to scale up manufacturing. One of the critical questions for national treasuries and programs is the question of price. Currently, the cost for procurement, according to IPM, is likely to be $13 to $15 per ring, and this is for the donor and the public sector. It's anticipated that there will be no cost to the end user in public healthcare settings. Modeling and cost effectiveness analyses suggest that the delivery costs for the ring could be lower than oral PrEP because of the lower requirements for monitoring. But it's important to note that of the studies published, there really have been a wide range of estimates around the projected impact of the ring on HIV incidence, ranging from an 11% to 132% impact than compared to oral PrEP alone, due to considerable uncertainty about uptake, consistent use, and also effectiveness in particular populations. And so it's going to be important that we have real-world delivery data to refine these estimates for impact. Future analyses are going to need to consider the cost of additional resources associated with offering choice, the costs of different delivery models aimed at maximizing coverage, such as non-traditional or non-clinic-based models, and really current recommendations that are to offer at sites that also offer oral PrEP, so the additive effects of having to offer both agents in one location. Several implementation studies are planned to address these questions of acceptability, uptake, patterns of use, and coverage in several countries in sub-Saharan Africa. And at least 2 of these projects are in the protocol development stage in South Africa and Zimbabwe. These implementation science projects will address important delivery questions related to demand creation, the acceptability in key population groups, delivery at either fixed or mobile delivery sites, the need and type of training of healthcare providers to offer choice, the implications of offering the ring as part of a comprehensive package of prevention services, and the systems needed for monitoring evaluation, especially in the context of product switching from oral PrEP to ring and potentially back. And these data are likely to become available by 2024. The second PrEP option that I want to talk to you about that is likely to become available in the next couple of years is long-acting injectable cabotegravir. Cabotegravir was shown to be generally safe and effective as PrEP following 2 phase 3 trials that were stopped prematurely for efficacy in 2020. HPTN-083 was a study conducted in cisgender men and transgender women who have sex with men in just over 4,500 participants in the Americas, Thailand, Vietnam, and South Africa. This study saw a 66% reduction in HIV infections in the CAB arm compared to the Truvada arm. HPTN-084 was a study in cisgender women aged 18 to 45 years. It enrolled just over 3,200 participants at 20 sites in 7 countries in sub-Saharan Africa. And in this study, HIV infection was reduced by 88% in the CAB arm compared to the Truvada arm. These trials are ongoing, and following the completion of the blinded phase, participants have been unblinded and retained on their allocated study arm, pending a protocol amendment to offer CAB. During this transition period, additional data have been presented to show that the protective effect of Kabbalah appears to be sustained. Earlier this year, data from HPTN-083 showed that the impacts of CAB were sustained in the unblinded year 1 data, and importantly that the majority of new CAB infections were due to injection delays or being 6 or more months off CAB. No new safety concerns were observed, and we also expect to see similar data presented from HPTN-084 sometime later this year. Another of the observations that has emerged over the period since unblinding is really the impact of long-acting cabotegravir on the delayed detection of HIV with conventional diagnostics. It's likely that cabotegravir suppresses viral replication and delays antibody production. And under these circumstances, prolonged monotherapy may lead to the emergence of INSTI resistance. Fortunately, this resistance can be overcome by non-INSTI regimens, and it was demonstrated earlier this year that the use of a sensitive HIV RNA assay may detect early infection and prevent INSTI resistance. Questions still remain about what testing algorithms should be used in programs, and obviously the addition of a viral load assay in our programs in Africa would be a huge challenge. So additional data is really needed to help guide those decisions. The other data that emerged is really in pregnant women who received CAB up until the time of pregnancy diagnosis. Importantly, no congenital anomalies were observed, and residual CAB was generally well tolerated during pregnancy. In terms of the need for dose adjustments, drug concentrations appear comparable in pregnant and non-pregnant women, and this supports ongoing evaluation of active dosing of Kabbalah in pregnant women in the open label extensions. So the HPTN studies will continue as open label trials of CAB PrEP. Both studies have introduced a protocol amendment to offer open label Kabbalah, particularly to those in the Truvada arm. Important design changes include the inclusion of participants under 18 years from the adolescent sub-studies. Also in the open label extensions, the oral lead-in has been made optional, and this is supported by data from treatment studies as well. The open label extension will include HIV RNA testing as part of the HIV testing algorithm. And while it's not believed that this may be required for programs, it will provide important additional data on what the added benefits of viral load testing may be for going forward. In the HPTN-084 study, the contraceptive requirements have been relaxed. Women are no longer required to use a long-acting reversible contraception, and they have the option to consent for active dosing through pregnancy, and safety and pharmacology will be assessed in that study. These trials have obviously collected large amounts of data, and there are a number of additional activities to support implementation decisions. As mentioned, the analysis of infections in the unblinded phase is ongoing for HPTN-084 and will likely be presented later this year. There has also been work to evaluate HIV viral load platforms for future use for viral load testing, including point of care or near point of care platforms. There are analyses of the potential to extend the interval between doses, particularly in women, from 8 to 12 weeks. And this will be combined with results from a case cohort analysis, which will look at the correlates of protection and guide potential future decisions about extended interval dosing. Finally, there have also been data collected on the drug-drug interactions between contraceptive use and gender-affirming hormones, which will be important for many of the populations likely to use CAB. So as part of preparation for implementation, a number of organizations were funded, including AVAC, the Prevention Market Manager, and the Clinton Health Access Foundation initiative to convene a broad range of stakeholders, really to develop an adaptable product introduction framework under the auspices of a project called BioPIC. This framework really focuses on actions to be taken prior to regulatory approval, after regulatory approval, and during the period of scale-up of product introduction in low and middle income countries, and really aims to mitigate some of the early learnings from introduction of oral PrEP into countries. The framework focuses on 5 thematic areas: manufacturing and distribution, clinical research and regulatory approvals, costing and modeling, delivery and implementation, and individual uptake and continued use. And here you can see an excerpt from the table looking at the actions required prior to regulatory approval for manufacturing and distribution, and clinical research and regulatory approvals. In terms of progress on those actions, it's important to know that submissions, obviously we heard the announcement in 2021 that the FDA had approved injectable cabotegravir for PrEP use. There have been a number of regulatory submissions in other jurisdictions, which will essentially ensure approvals for all of the countries involved in HPTN 083 and 084. And we know that the WHO has initiated their guideline review process, and hopefully we will soon hear about WHO guidelines. This will pave the way for many additional actions at a country level. So one of the hot button topics has really been the issue of cost effectiveness, pricing, and the implications for access, particularly in low and middle income countries. And concerns have been raised really that prices may limit access despite effectiveness and huge benefit for people in low and middle income countries. So there are 2 studies that have been published. One has been published and one is a preprint that have looked at cost effectiveness in the USA and in South Africa, and have highlighted that the incremental benefits that CAB may provide might not justify large price differentials. So in the USA, essentially Kabbalah would be value for money if it were half the current Kabbalah rilpivirine price. And in South Africa, Kabbalah could avert 3 times more HIV infections and save 3 times more life years, but the cost per CAB injection really needs to be less than 2 times the cost of a 2-month supply of generic TDF-FTC to be cost effective. And this leads really to a threshold price of about $63 to $100 per year. And it's also important to note that this is a lot lower than the $150 a year for the ring. So it's become apparent to many people that access is going to be constrained unless there is tiered pricing for low and middle income countries. And we've heard that based, I think, on the feedback from many stakeholders, that there is now a new coalition for preparing for access for Kabbalah, Together for Voluntary Licensing, also known as PrEP Act, VL Coalition, which will support continued work towards the goal of broad access for CAB and LMICs. And this is led by the Medicines Patent Pool with ViiV Healthcare, and really aimed at addressing the more complex issues associated with generic manufacturing of a nanosuspension versus generic manufacturing of oral pills. So there are a couple of other implementation considerations for Kabbalah. The first is around populations and approaches and how to deliver for specific focus populations. One of the issues identified by WHO is really that there is limited data on how to offer these products to key populations, and more experience is needed for delivery to key populations, including sex workers and people who inject or use drugs. The other group that may require additional research are really transgender women, and this is with respect to alternative injection sites for people with buttock implants or fillers. There are also additional questions about models for delivery. At the moment, injections are healthcare administered, and so the question is, can these be added onto existing PrEP programs? Do all delivery sites need to be clinic-based? Can these be offered within key population services, which may be peer-led? How can they be integrated more broadly into sexual and reproductive health services? And what interventions are really needed to support healthcare providers to offer product choice? The other issue, which is probably unique to cabotegravir, is really what are the optimal testing strategies needed to minimize the emergence of resistance, particularly if viral load testing is going to be a barrier in many low and middle income countries. And what are the conversations that we need to have about the trade-offs that may occur if we adopt rapid diagnostic testing algorithms? And really what we need is an implementation science agenda to address these questions. So just to say that there are a number of PrEP introduction studies that include CAB for PrEP. These will take place, several of them have had funding confirmed and are going through the protocol development stage and will likely be implemented later this year. These are the Catalyst study, Project PrEP, and the IMPrEP study in Brazil. There are also a number of studies that have been proposed for South Africa, Thailand, Kenya, Uganda, Australia, France, and West Africa, which are under consideration and will be implemented in a range of populations and are going to be important to track in the coming years in terms of the lessons that will be learned about for PrEP scale-up. So I think one of the key things that is going to be critical to consider is how we offer choice in our HIV prevention services. And this is not something we have much experience doing. We know that in family planning, choice can be offered, but this may be more complex in the context of new PrEP products that have variable data on effectiveness, have different side effect profiles and different lengths of reversibility. So what we do know is that decision support tools have been used successfully in healthcare settings to really improve client knowledge, to support values congruent choices, and to also help with risk perception. And it's believed that a PrEP decision tool could overcome many of the client and provider barriers to PrEP delivery, particularly in resource-constrained settings where often there are time constraints or provider training and skills issues, which may limit shared decision-making. So here is an example really of a decision support tool that we worked on with colleagues at the University of Washington. It was evaluated in a randomized controlled trial in Johannesburg and demonstrated a twofold higher PrEP continuation rate at month 1, which is a very useful finding. This version of the decision tool has now been updated to include the dapivirine ring and cabotegravir and is currently pending additional evaluation, but may be useful in many of our settings where we have limited resources. So in summary, long-acting PrEP agents may overcome current PrEP persistence challenges. The dapivirine ring has several country approvals. It's included in the WHO guidelines, and it's likely to be included in demonstration projects in 2022. Cabotegravir is undergoing regulatory review in many countries in sub-Saharan Africa. It's pending WHO guidelines and will likely be included in several funded demonstration projects once those country approvals are in place. There are a number of additional questions about the safety and effectiveness of these products in adolescents and pregnant and breastfeeding women. And it's essential that we get that data as soon as possible so that these populations are not excluded from future implementation. Planned demonstration projects are going to address a range of really important questions about product introduction and potential impact as a result of expanded coverage and choice. These coverage estimates are going to be really critical for informing price, cost effectiveness, and scaling up of manufacturing to ensure access. In the case of cabotegravir, we have to give particular consideration to the HIV testing approaches that will be used both for this agent and for future long-acting systemic agents. And it's likely that decision support tools and other job aids will be important for supporting healthcare providers to offer PrEP clients choices. With that, I'd like to thank you all very much for your attention.